Hey, welcome to Bluejay Banter, live here from the Let It Fly Sports Bar in downtown Omaha. I'm sure many of you checked it out before or after a Creighton game, and we're not going to have a home game here for a while, not until next week. So get on down here, watch the playoffs this weekend, and it's always a great time down here. Thanks for watching. Hey, if you can do us a favor, hit that subscribe button and like button. We are so close to hitting our first tier of subscribers, so just a few more. Tell your friends, family to check it out. And we'd greatly appreciate it. Today I'm with Ross Ferrarini, and later on at the end of our discussion here, you're going to see an interview we did with Coach Jim Flanery earlier this afternoon. Just broke down all things with Flan, recapped the season. They're off to a great 4-0 start in the conference play, and they have a game Wednesday night at Sokol Arena, 6 o'clock. So go check them out. Great team. They very much favored to go to 5-0 on the season, and then in 2 weeks. 2 weeks from Saturday, they got the big game at CHI against UConn. So the men will play at 12:30. It's a pink out for the men, and then it'll also pink out for the women, and that game will start at 4:30. So you need a ticket for both games, but hey, well worth it to check out the Jays against perennial power UConn. I want to thank our sponsors, Care Miners, Discount Window and Door, West Pacific Dental Group, Infusion Brewing Company, and also BluejayBanter.com. It's been a long time since you and I have spoke. Happy New Year.
Yeah.
Hope your holiday went well.
All was well that ends well. Yeah, it was good.
All right.
Went to the game on New Year's Eve. Stuck around downtown afterwards. Had a nice New Year's Eve. It was a great game. Well, great win, I should say. The game itself wasn't that great.
Kind of a rock fight.
But, it was a really ugly game,
So
actually.
let me ask you this, because this is what I think. That St. John's, all I've heard is how good that St. John's team is.
I thought they looked horrible.
And I've seen, thank you, because I said that too. The worst game in college basketball ever would be Texas A&M and St. John's against each other.
Well, yeah, we talked about it after the game. I mean, they just, their style of play is just not very aesthetically pleasing. They don't have a ton of outside shooting, so they don't take a lot of threes. They like to live in that mid-range, which again, in today's day and age, is a little bit of a lost art. The analytics have almost quote unquote solved basketball in the sense of you want shots at the rim or you want threes, and they don't really abide by that. And but they've still been pretty darn successful this year. I mean, gosh, they're 12-3 or something, and they lost at the buzzer to Baylor in the Bahamas. So they've certainly got talent. They're athletic. They're strong. The first 4, 5, 6 minutes of the game, it honestly looked like they might blow us out. I think they got up 20-10 pretty early there, and then we kind of clawed back, and Jemiah played well. Steven hit a couple of big shots, and then it was off to the races. Obviously, that was 2 games ago. Then we went out to Marquette, but honestly, had a chance to make things really interesting at Marquette, and I don't even think we particularly played that well. Yeah, I was just talking to a couple of coaches here a few minutes ago, and I said, they asked me, what do you think about the game? And I said, look, usually when Marquette gets that 10, 12-point lead, the doors get blown off, and they just run people out of their gym. Especially with a team like that where they're really deep at the guard position and wings, and they have athletic wings that can really suffocate you defensively. So yes, to your point, usually that if they get to that at home, especially, they can run away with it. So credit to our guys for sticking in the fight. I mean, gosh, that's a game that got kind of interesting there. And Stephen Ashworth goes 1 of 13 from 3. So that's what I was telling DK. I said, you never have a night where Ashworth's going to shoot 1 of 13 from 3. You never have a night where Kalkbrenner shoots under 50% from the field, and you had both of them in the same night. Yeah, missed a lot of shots, kind of right at the. And you were right in that game. And if you look at the stats, even in shooting, we out-rebounded them. We only had 12 turnovers against Marquette. That's pretty good. Yeah. We didn't shoot it great from 3, obviously because of the 1 to 13. But we all the stats you looked at, we made more free throws than they shot. I mean, everything that we want to do.
So
have been pretty good defensively, honestly, which is interesting. I remember the first couple of games of the year against UT Rio Grande Valley and Fairleigh Dickinson, we didn't look very good defensively.
No,
and have kind of turned things around on that end of the floor, and a lot of effort and kind of will to on that end has certainly helped. And as everybody can kind of figure out by now, there's not a whole lot of offensive creation outside of Steven and Jemiah. So you have to kind of take the good with the bad a little bit. Obviously Jackson McAndrew has come along. I've really, really liked Jackson's growth. I mean, just his aggressiveness shooting the basketball. And I am as bullish on Jackson as anybody in the fan base is. I think he's got a chance to be really, really, really good.
I'd say something because I talked to a lot of people who really like him. Yeah. And the other thing about Jackson too, I've noticed over the last couple of games is, there was that spell where we weren't rebounding the basketball well. And I was at practice one day talking with Coach Mack about this, and that, I said, I watched a rebound, I think it was the Alabama game, and I said, I know you've been working so hard on to get box out, and I go, some of these young guys now they're so worried about boxing out. The ball is literally right there, and they don't see it because they're so worried about getting their man. And he goes, yeah, they're not in tune with like being aware of their surroundings and the whole game flow and everything. They're it's still a learning process with that. But he goes, you're right. Getting the ball is the main purpose. Rebound. He goes, and then one of the other assistants told me, they goes, yeah, I don't think Doug ever boxed out once, but he got a ton of rebounds.
Yeah, he just had an unbelievable instinct to just like a nose for the ball. Yeah, no, it's a good point. It's there's more to it than just boxing out. Like you have to go physically get the rebound. You have to go pursue it. And so they've done a better job on that end. I'm with you. It's interesting for whatever reason. And listen, this is not unique to our fan base. Every fan base on the planet in every sport seems to pick a couple of guys every year to just scapegoat. It was a lot of times it was Steven last year. A couple of years ago, for those that remember, a lot of times it was Arthur Kaluma.
Yep. This year it's Mason.
This year it seems to be Mason, but it also seems to be sometimes, from what I view, Jemiah Neal, and I don't understand it. I don't get. Jemiah has been really good in my opinion. Now, he has turned the ball over a little bit, and he's trying to grasp playing in our system compared to what he was used to at Arizona State. We've talked about it on this show before. There was not a whole lot of structure in what Arizona State does offensively.
No.
And so I think Jemiah has been really good in a lot of facets. Yes, he's had a couple of games where he's probably turned the ball over a little bit too much, but I don't know what you've seen with him, but I really like his versatility.
I tell people in practice, in practice, like he dominates some of the scrimmages. Like he's coming down and like nailing running 3-pointers and you just didn't see it in the game. Now he's starting to hit some threes.
Yep.
It's starting to come to him. And nobody gets coached harder than him in practice. I mean, Mac is on him a lot because Mac knows he's not used to structure. And Steven works with him a lot on, hey, if you go under, I think you're going over. That puts me in a bad spot. Trying to explain the whole fundamentals.
Totally. And I think with Jemiah too, he's just his demeanor. He doesn't really change his demeanor much. And so I feel like some people take that as like indifference when that's definitely not the case. The way I see it, I just think he's just a very kind of stoic guy, and he just his demeanor is his demeanor, and so I actually kind of think it's a positive. Listen, on the Mason thing, I feel for Mason because he's obviously not shooting the ball well for a guy who was in a totally different role the past 2 years. As just a spot-up shooter where he had a whole lot of other creators, and he was, an offensive rebounder and just a spot-up four-man. He's obviously playing a different role this year, and it's just, the shooting woes have compounded on themselves, and it's he's in a rut, and I feel for him because it's hard to get out of that, but he is capable. I do think that, much like he hit 2 big threes against KU, I do think he will be due for some positive regression in that department. He has to be.
The last 2 practices I've been at, he's had his best practices. I thought I was just mentioned to DK. I go, man, I thought Mason played really well. And he goes, oh, yeah. He played great against Marquette. He had 5 rebounds.
Yeah.
He was aggressive. He probably needs to be more aggressive. He goes, if he could just start, if that lid can just come off the basket. I think if he makes one, look out.
100%. And it's hard for Mason, too, in kind of this new role where a lot of times he's in there and he's a 3. He's not – that's not really his game to create off the dribble. That's not what he does. Right. And so, a lot of times in today's modern, game of basketball, like the wings, every single wing, and even a lot of times a 4, you've got to be able to create some and play and pick and roll some, and that's just not his strong suit. And so it's, you feel for him trying to adjust to it, but I think it's, like I said, I think some positive regression's coming.
Yeah, I no doubt. And, chat in our post games, a lot of times will say, he's brought up a point, he kind of sees some things that I don't even think about, for him being a point guard. And a lot of times, with the turnovers, he's like, look, I know when I played point guard, there was times there's so many tall guys, you can't see.
Yeah.
Your depth perception on how far to throw that lob to Kalk is way off.
Yeah,
he goes, people think, they're sitting up and they're like, whoa, how could you not make that pass? And it's just it's things like that. And with Mason, he said, I just think having that leg issue, he's just not fully comfortable yet. No,
I'm with you.
So that was a good point. Hey, I want to just jump in with some of our sponsors. First of all, Infusion Brewing Company, great sponsor. Want to thank Ryan and the whole crew over there. We're planning another event later on this year at Infusion, so make sure and look out for that. We'll let you know when that is. I'm sure we'll have another packed house, so you'll have to get in early and sign up for that. They are the beer here, the Let It Fly beer, brewed at Infusion, so it's a staple here at Let It Fly and obviously at the arena as well. Great tasting room over in their facility, so check it all out. That's Infusion Brewing Company. Go to infusionbrewingcompany.com. Also, West Pacific Dental Group. Dr. Hogan and his staff are terrific. If you're looking for a dentist, go to West Pacific Dental Group. They're my dentist, and they really take care of you, whether it's a dental emergency or just a checkup. West Pacific Dental Group is the place to go. They give you compassionate care and consult you on every move. So give them a call today, 402-697-0765. That's 402-697-0765. So, we kind of got over that hump of that. We kind of put the Georgetown game in the rearview mirror.
Yep.
Kalk, I think, and Mac had a little bit of Mac kind of alluded to it. They had a little chit-chat after that game. And
after Georgetown? Yeah,
and Mac is just like, look, you've got to not walk around with your head down. These freshmen look at you, and they think, well, geez, this is pretty bad, I guess,
Yep.
So since then, I think Kalk's played with a better attitude, number one. Number two, he's been way more vocal in practice and on the floor as well, and I think that's helping things. Something interesting happened the other night. I wonder what your comment is on it. I think it was Stevie setting that pick and roll when coming up, and Kalk had to screen him a lot for Marquette. And apparently he was either elbowing Kalkbrenner or purposely going into his hip. And in the second half, Kalk got, never fouls. And he got that
we
blocking
got the
foul on the
moving screen and
just
he was yapping at Cam Jones.
Yeah. Or was Cam? Or
I thought it was Cam Jones.
Oh, I thought it was what's his
Stevie Mitchell.
Stevie Mitchell. I thought it was Stevie Mitchell. But anyway, yeah. You
don't see that from him much.
He barked at him, and so you knew that foul was purposeful. Like, hey, don't do that blank again anymore. That was like Kalk payback, and I think he went out of the game after that. And Mac went over and talked to him, and you could see Kalk going, "Hey, just making sure he knows that's unacceptable what he was doing."
That's what I want to see.
Yes,
that's what we want to see from Kalk.
Absolutely.
And I think the biggest thing with Kalk is when he's good and when he's really engaged, he is really good, man. And there are times with him where if he does for whatever reason, he's not getting the ball much on the post because they're denying, and he's getting, out physicaled, and then he does, kind of to your point with Mac having the talk with him. Sometimes he'll hang his head maybe a little bit, and I think he does it kind of subconsciously. But when Kalk is playing with an edge, he can be. We've seen this really, really, really good. So, hopefully that carries forward. Yeah. I mean, listen, I'm not going to sit here and say this is the exact same team because obviously it's not. But, some interesting parallels to kind of what you're saying with after the Georgetown game. I mean, I remember the year that we won the Big East and then COVID canceled the tournament. If people remember, that team started 0-2 in Big East, and they had a bad loss at Georgetown. And I remember Tyshawn Alexander just did not have a very good game. Same sort of deal where he was kind of hanging his head most of the game, and shots weren't falling.
And that's a big game for Tyshawn because he's from that area.
And he's from Charlotte, but not
in
just
general area.
Yeah,
and I think he played some AAU ball up in DC.
And things really, really turned the corner. And Tyshawn was unbelievable the rest of the year. So it's. Sometimes you just get into I say that because sometimes you just get in the middle of the season and there's so much going on and you have bad games and it's hard for guys to realize like you still got 15, 16, 17 more games here to go. Yep. And the team, we still got all the goals intact. I mean, so I don't know if you want to touch on the rest of the Big East. It's obviously it's not a secret. It's not a secret to everybody that the league has not been very good.
No, but I think let's start with that. So I was always telling everybody the bottom of the league's awful, and after the first 2 games where we played 2, I said, maybe the bottom's not as bad as I thought. Maybe the top's not as good as I thought because Xavier was giving UConn a game, and it was on and on and on like that. So I think it's maybe better. We're missing, like Hopkins is missing it at Providence.
But then Providence takes UConn right to the wire yesterday. Was up the entire
double
game.
Digits.
Yeah. It's a really weird year in our league. I think Marquette is legit.
They're far, to me, they're
the
way
best
above
team.
everybody.
I agree.
Yep.
If UConn had a healthy McNeely, I don't know what to think about them. I've watched them a couple of times where I'm like, man, they look really good again. There's a couple of times I've watched them also where I'm like, gosh, they are vulnerable.
They are.
They're not near as good defensively.
I think they're both of what you just said, really. Yep.
Yeah. They're not near as good defensively, which obviously I think that shouldn't come as you use Donovan Clingan and you lose Cam Spencer. That shouldn't come as a massive surprise.
Mahaney's not as good as
Mahaney.
People
Mahaney hasn't turned out. I think,
which doesn't surprise me. When I saw him at St. Mary's, I mean, he was a good player, but I was like, man, you're going into a different system here. This is going to be a little bit different,
Yep. Then we talk about, probably what most people would consider maybe that third team, St. John's, who's just, they're fine. I don't know. They're okay to me. Again, they didn't look very good against us. They obviously didn't play super well again against Butler. On Saturday. I mean, Butler had them down most of that game before St. John's came roaring back and in the second half. So the team, and I'm curious your thoughts on this, but the team that is impressed, but they're not very deep at all, but they've got the talent and they're kind of top 5-6 is Georgetown.
Yeah. I mean, obviously they played well against us.
Right.
They haven't played the toughest schedule so far.
No.
So they're going to get in the meat of their schedule here. So let's see what they do. Like you said, they're not very deep, and that depth starts wearing India in late January, early February.
Very much so. And they're going to have a seriously good record in conference play because their non-conference resume is non-existent.
I can tell you from bracketology, they're not even on anybody's remotely list because their non-conference was so bad.
They're going to have to beat Marquette and UConn at least once, both of them, I would argue. I mean, the rest of the league, there's nothing there.
The only way I could see is if they pretty much ran the table, maybe except one game against the lower half, and then maybe got one of those games, then they would be in the conversation. But again, then you're talking probably 26 wins and maybe snag one in the Big East tournament somehow, and you're right. They're gonna have to do some things, and I don't. To your points, I don't see them being able to be that consistent all the way to like run that lower half. I do think, even though they played a terribly weak non-conference, so everybody kind of got their hopes up a little bit, I do think down the road DePaul's going to beat one or two teams at home.
Yeah, it's possible. I mean, they're obviously
I think they're
better
give
than
somebody
last
a game.
year.
Yeah.
I don't think they're significantly better. Like, a lot of people were starting to kind of chat about them, and it felt like, at least in social media and circles and stuff, and I'm like, I look at that. I looked at the schedule. I'm like, what? They haven't played anybody.
I think Seton Hall's clearly the worst team in the league.
I would agree.
They're not even close. Butler,
Butler has not looked good.
They haven't looked good, but let's see what happens. We never play well when we go there, so hopefully we can come away with a win Saturday. And then I think a curious team. I mean, Providence, I don't know what to think. They've actually not performed very well either. I mean, they've lost some games at home to the lower half teams, and
I actually kind of like Xavier. But they also they've had a couple of games where
they were right there and couldn't win. I think, what are they, 1-3 or 0-4? I
don't think they're over, are they?
They're down there. I know that. And then the other one is, I mean, I wonder what you think about this. So Dixon, he just gets better and better.
Villanova is the one team that has looked much better.
Yeah.
And now they
looked horrible at the beginning of the year.
Horrible, and we beat them at home, and we shot really, really, really well when we played them. So,
but Dixon is so tough. I mean, and
Dixon is really
Jason
good.
Green was our guest that night after the game. And I was like, wow, Jason, there's a lot of times. And he goes, you know what it is? He's got such a high pocket for his release that he goes, there's a time I thought, I'm going to block this easy and right over my hand.
Yep.
And so
Xavier's 1-3. We've got three teams that are 0-4. DePaul is 0-4. Butler's 0-4. Seton Hall's 0-3.
Yeah. We've got two are undefeated.
As far as our resume, to me, from the outset, I mean, we're going to depend. Obviously, it depends on how our conference play stands out or plays out. But we're going to need that KU win to hold up.
You know who's really helping us out right now is Nebraska. They're really
but we lost.
We jumped. Every time they keep having a big win like UCLA, that pushes us up the ladder. That loss keeps looking better as we move along. So, we're gonna have to. We took care of St. John's. Okay. So we're going to have to take, we maybe could get away with getting swept by Marquette, but we need to at least beat UConn. And then we need to pretty much run the table against that lower third.
I mean, gosh, a team that you needed, what would have been huge.
That A&M game would have been huge.
Well, another game
we had that game the whole way.
That would have been huge, but game. Again, probably from a momentum standpoint, I don't know how good of a record they're going to end up. I mean, but gosh, if Notre Dame could have beaten Carolina,
they don't
gained
seem like
a little bit of
there.
momentum, I'm with you.
But,
they don't seem
that
like
A&M game, we had that game the first 38 minutes. We dominated that game, or not dominated, controlled it. And, that was unfortunate. If we'd have won that one, because they're in a 3-4 seed range right now. So, I think the thing you're going to have to watch for is when the Marquettes and UConns of the world go to a Providence, Georgetown, Villanova. Are they going to come away with the W? That's probably going to decide the conference title, is who doesn't slip up in like those, and Xavier, those four teams,
So we're 9-6. Torvik has us projected 19-12, 12-8 in league.
Yeah, we got to get to with our resume, with our non-conference resume.
I'm just concerned that
we kind of got to get to 21 probably.
Yep, I was just going to say I'm just concerned with the down nature of the league that isn't going to be enough.
The SEC is getting like 13, 14. The Big Ten's getting 11, 12. The Big 12's going to get 9, 10. Speaking of the Big 12, what a job D-Rock's off to.
Unbelievable.
Without Tucker, too.
I mean, man, two of my former assistants duking it out Saturday. I watched much of the game. And, man, I felt for Lutz in the sense that they could not make a shot to save their lives. I mean, it was as bad of a shooting performance as I've probably seen at that level. And, they actually made a little bit of a run late in the second half. They cut it to 13 with about 3 minutes left after being down 20-25 all game. And, huge hats off to D-Rock. I mean, gosh, they're doing this without Tucker. You go into Allen Fieldhouse.
What's his status? Because I've heard different things.
My understanding is it might be an uphill battle for him to come back anytime soon, but I don't know specifics.
Yeah, I mean, the original thing I heard, though, he was out. He's out for the year. But then that was kind of pulled back a little bit. So I don't know.
Yeah, they seem to be winning without him. It's interesting. Yeah. They've slowed games down. I mean, gosh, you want to talk about a nice resume right now. West Virginia's got a nice resume.
Yeah.
Beat Gonzaga, beat Arizona.
Yeah, they're
at
if
Kansas.
they just take care of the business in the Big 12, they're going to be a nice seed going in the NCAA tournament. Hey, before we wrap up here, I just want to speak just a minute about Care Miners Home Health Care. Jim and his staff do such a great job over there. So if you need if you got injured or ill senior loved one that you may need to find care for, go to careminersnebraska.com. Check out all that Care Miners has to offer. And when you do that, you'll be ready for the time when that comes. You'll know exactly what Care Miners can do and how much they can help you. And I think that'll be a big help to you. So go to careminersnebraska.com. Also want to thank Discount Window and Door of Omaha. John and his staff do such a terrific job. They put windows in my house, and we are just so happy with them. It's helped our energy bill. It's done wonders to the appearance of our home. So there's the before and after, and they're in and out of there in just like 3 hours when they installed them. They give you a full service. They have a guy come out, show you everything they've got. They bring another guy. They measure once. They measure twice to make sure everything fits perfectly. So check them out. That's Discount Window and Door of Omaha. And then go to bluejaybanter.com. We've got a lot of stuff going on over there, and this is a great time of year to sign up as we head into the teeth of the college basketball season. I want to put out one more plug here to bracketville.com. My bracketology is seen at bracketville.com. Dave Ullman, one of the best in the business, run the site. He wants to kind of expand it, so he brought me aboard this year, and we're starting some great things over there. One thing we have is the BB Rankings, which is a resume ranking just based on what the team has done with the schedule they've played. And pretty interesting. So I do them weekly. Do you know who number one is this week? You will not guess. But if you saw their resume, you'd be like, holy God.
You're talking about who
what
has
team
the
is
best
number one
resume
in those rankings right now. Like it doesn't take into Ken Palm, doesn't take into the computer side of it. It just takes.
So you're telling me it's gonna be somebody that's surprising. That's essentially what you're.
Yeah, it's not Auburn, who leads every other statistical category. Not totally off the radar, but just I feel like they're off the radar to most people aren't even thinking about them.
I was gonna say it can't be Oregon because they've just lost a few games here.
Oregon was at the time.
Originally.
Now remember when you lose to a Q1A team, that doesn't hurt you at all.
Yeah.
But Oregon's right up there. Memphis.
Memphis. That's not surprising.
Memphis has, get this, Memphis has 10 Q1 and Q2 wins. 10.
Okay.
The next closest school is 7.
Wow.
When you start looking, and have they all been, the Duke and Kentucky's of the world? No. But they've beat their fair share of upper A1 teams as well. So they had a bad loss. And they lost a couple other games, so they're not, they don't come to people's mind, but they're a team that's, definitely in the mix. Okay, so to set you up, Saturday, 11 a.m. tip at Butler in Indianapolis. I've talked to several people that are going. It's a great trip if you ever get a chance to go and see a game there. And then I believe next week we have a home game, finally, because we're 4 or 5 on the road here. We're in the middle of that stretch.
Yeah.
So I think we play Providence here at home. So stick around right now. You're going to see an interview with head coach Jim Flanery of the women's team. Thanks for listening. We won't have a show next week, but we will have one in 2 weeks. So thanks. Make sure you hit that subscribe button and have a great night.
Hey, we're here with head basketball coach, Creighton University, Jim Flanery. Hi, Coach.
Hi, Tim. How are you?
Very
Happy
good. Hope your holiday was good.
Yes, it was. I was actually saying, when you get older, it's slightly easier to plug out. honestly. Like, I'm in coach mode for whatever, and I think, 15, 20 years ago when Christmas break would come up, I'd be like, kind of half in, half out on family stuff, or maybe, but now it's just you just get a little bit older, you get a little more perspective, and you don't plug completely away from basketball, but I find that I'm a little bit better at actually being present when I'm with family. So,
There you go. Well,
yeah.
hey, it seems to be working. You're off to a great start in the conference, 4-0. I know the schedule's been favorable to you, but just kind of reflect on the season so far and the start of conference play.
Yeah, well, we really challenged ourselves in the non-conference. I mean, we played, four NCAA tournament teams from a year ago out of the gate, two at home, two on the road. So we knew those first four were going to be tough, and we came out 2-2, and lost a close one at South Dakota State, and then kind of didn't play very well at Kansas State, Kansas State still only has one loss, but then kind of steadied ourselves. Our schedule got a little easier, and felt like we found a little bit of a groove. And then right before Christmas played UCLA and got humbled. And I think, but that's not a bad thing. I felt we had won 8 in a row, and I think we felt good going into UCLA. But then you find out there's still a lot of things that we can improve upon. And having said that, I think we ran into a really good team, and we didn't play well that night. I'd like to think we're not 30 points worse than them, but
Well, you couldn't throw it in the ocean. I mean,
yeah, and that's part of it. Like, you have nights like that. I had somebody say that, a former coach say, we've all been on that. We've all had games like that where you just can't, nothing goes right. And I think that was one of those nights. But then, I thought we had a tall task, coming out of the break, we had to go to St. John's on the 28th, which was a game I'm like, I don't like playing on the 28th. I think it's really hard to come back that quickly after Christmas, and especially when you play on the road. But we played really well that game. Came back and kind of stumbled through Butler, but then won pretty convincingly at Providence. So we're 4-0 in the league. Like you said, I mean, we haven't played UConn yet. We haven't played Seton Hall, who I think is really good, but we have played 3 of our first 4 conference games on the road. So to do that, so to win 3 road games already through this time of year is really good. And plenty to work on. I think the goal is to keep winning, but it's also when a team like Connecticut comes up here in 2.5 weeks, are we going to be ready to compete better than we did really against the 2 elite teams on our schedule so far, which were Kansas State and UCLA? And I'd like to think that I don't want to overlook anybody between now and UConn, because but you're trying to do both. You're trying to win games and get better, and hopefully we're attentive
right.
to both those things.
You speak of UCLA, and I wanted to ask you about that. Like, when you play those top-notch teams, whether it's UConn a couple times a year or you go out of conference to play, what do you really learn? Like, what do you learn from that? Like, I mean, obviously you probably know, hey, to compete at this level, I need X, Y, and Z or whatever. But seeing it in person and play and having to prepare for that team and then play that team, do you get a little more insight on maybe what it takes to get to that next level?
Yeah, well, the reality is and it's not that we can't beat UCLA, but the reality is there's more of a gap in our sport than there is on the men's side.
I would say that that's very true. Yeah.
Because and it makes sense, because if you took a Duke or a Kentucky or Kansas and you said, okay, you guys are going to get the best recruiting classes every year, and by the way, those players are going to stay for 4 years, then that's what you'd have on the men's side, right? If Cooper Flagg stayed at Duke for 4 years, okay, that's what you have with Caitlin Clark and Juju Watkins and Hannah Hidalgo at Notre Dame. I mean, you have the teams that have the best talent, and by the way, they have experience too. Whereas on the men's side, you have those really, really elite players are gone in a year or two, and so even though you've got a lot of movement, even in the women's side, you have 4-year college players, and so Juju Watkins and Lauren Betts, who's the 6'8" post player at UCLA, they're going to be there 4 years. So that's why there's a bigger gap at the top of our game, I think. But having said that, there's still an opportunity to compete. We played that team, and they had maybe a little less talent last year, but we played them a 2-possession game in the NCAA tournament. So again, you just have to your margin for error is just so narrow. And I think the thing that came out of that game is we just didn't rebound at the beginning of the game the way we needed to, and then they got confident. We gave up 7 offensive rebounds in the first quarter, and maybe they're physically gifted enough to get 3 or 4 of those, regardless of how committed to rebounding we were. But if we were a little more committed, we kept them off the glass. Maybe we didn't give them as much confidence, and maybe we didn't fall as far behind, where you lose the game mentally in the first quarter because you're playing from so far behind. So, yeah, your margin for error just shrinks.
You got 2 scorers, Morgan and Lauren, who are over 17 points a game. Everybody else is down in the 6-7. Would you like to see a more consistent third scorer emerge? And if you did, who do you think that might be?
Yeah, well, I think it's Keani Lockett or Molly Mogensen or Kennedy Townsend, who's come off the bench but done a really good job of being a 6, 8, 9, 10 point a game scorer pretty consistently. Yeah, it's tough because I think, Tim, when you look at the first half of our Providence game, those 2 were 2 for 17. And so as a staff, even this morning, we're talking about it, and I brought it up to our team. It's like, the question then becomes not maybe when they get to 2 for 17, but let's say they start out together, they're 2 for 10 or 2 for 11. Do you say, oh, we got to screen better? I got to run a play for Morgan to get her going. I got to run something specifically for Lauren to get her going. Or do you say, you know what? Let's put the ball in Molly's hands. Let's put the ball in Keani's hands, or let's run a set for Kennedy. And there really is no right answer to that, because if Molly makes 2 field goals, that does take some pressure off Lauren, and it lifts our team up, and maybe Lauren then gets an easier one because, okay, all of a sudden we've run a couple plays for Molly and they can let down. Or you can say, hey, we just gotta keep running stuff for those 2. But that's kind of the nature of having such a gap between the 2. Because I asked the team that. I said, look, that's part of basketball, is we can either say we're forcing it to Lauren and Morgan, or let's run a couple actions for Keani. Let's run an action for Molly. And, we've done that. Green Bay played drop ball screen coverage against us, similar to what our men do with Calk. And we said, we're going to have to make some mid-range game. They'll guard us really well in the half court, but we're going to have to make some mid-range shots off ball screens. And we tried Lauren early, and she wasn't as hot as normal. And so we tried Molly, and Molly was 8 for 11 in the first half of that game. And we kept going to it. But I think the answer is it's got to be one of those 3, but I do think we at least have that experience level where one of those 3 can give us a couple baskets when those other 2 are struggling.
A lot of us, we always, no matter the level of basketball, whatever, we just want to talk about the scores, but there's
for sure.
There's a couple other things, rebounding, defense, and turnovers, right? That probably decide all the games. In those 3 areas, what would you say your team's the strongest at right now? What would you say, which one of those is probably you need the most work on?
Well, we're good at taking care of the ball. We're last I checked, we were 4th or 5th in the country in fewest turnovers a game, and we're usually top 10 in assist to turnover ratio. So that's not really an issue. Rebounding is the biggest one. We're a little undersized. I think, we basically, if you look at our starting lineup, we traded out 6'1" Emma Ronsick for 5'8" Keani Lockett. So we just don't quite have the size. And I said the other day, I think about 2 out of every 3 games we seem to grasp how committed we need to be to rebounding, but we need to make it 3 out of every 3. Because, you get a look, we'll have a couple games and we'll praise them and we'll say, hey, great job rebounding. That's what we need to do. And maybe we say it the second game and then we forget to say it enough the third game, before the third game, and then we don't do it. And it's, we have to do it as a team, obviously, because we don't have the size and strength to do it, with just 2 or 3 people. So, but I'd say it's, and we're one of the best free throw shooting teams in the country. I think, so we're doing some things really well, but I'd say rebounding is probably the thing that we need to be just committed to every game at a level that we really haven't quite shown we're willing to do.
I had a coaching class and so forth in college, and our instructor was the head basketball coach, and he, back in his, Dave Schultz was his name back in the day.
Yeah.
He was one of the, he was all Big Ten 2-3 years in a row and whatever. He was 6'5". Yeah, he led the nation, I think, in rebounding. He said, it's all just wanting that ball more than the other guy. And then on our team at Purdue, he goes, I needed to get that rebound because if I didn't, one of my teammates was going to get it, and then I'm not even going to lead the team in rebounding. That was his mindset. And I think that, like, some of that's lost. I know on the men's side, Mac is struggling with that too. Well, what's the first thing you say? Got to box out. And I was telling Mac I was watching some film of the Alabama game, the rerun of the Alabama game, and I mean, yeah, they're intent about boxing. These freshmen are in there and they're trying hard. They're boxing out, but the ball is like 2 feet away from them. They're not grabbing it. I mean, the key is to grab the basketball. And that's got to be tough to, like, really every day talk about the mindset of rebounding.
Yeah, it is. It's a mindset. You look at the men's team, losing Baylor was huge from a rebounding standpoint. Forget about all the playmaking he can do, but the guy was good for 9 rebounds a game. And, you can't take that for granted. And I think what drives coaches crazy, is there's not always complete control there, because, long rebound, you can do a good job blocking out, and sometimes the ball just goes where you're not. And, but if you do your job most of the time, you're going to be in a position where you're going to be at least a pretty solid rebounding team. And, I've told our team, like, when we've been our best teams, we're never going to be +5 or +10, because we're usually smaller and more skilled. And, and that's why we're such a good turnover team in terms of low turnovers. But I said, our best teams have been anywhere from even to +2 or even +3 on the glass. And if we get to that -2, -3, then we're not as good a team. And, and like you said, there's a lot more under their control, I think, sometimes than they think.
Yeah. You mentioned about, the top teams are all getting, players for 4 years, and how, I mean, obviously it's creeped into every college sport, NIL and the transfer portal and so forth. I don't think a lot of fans really know a lot about it from the women's side and women's basketball. Like, how much is that a factor when you're trying to either retain your roster or get new players, and how much is the portal affecting you?
Yeah, I think NIL is going to change, because we're assuming that we're going to start with revenue sharing come next August. So it'll come under the umbrella of the university. I think that actually is going to be a good thing for Creighton. I think we've mostly relied on marketplace NIL for our players. I mean, they're, right. you talked about Morgan and Lauren. They have enough name notoriety locally that they've gotten some deals. And, Jamie Horan is a local player from Millard South. And so we've relied more on that, but, yeah, it's only going to get greater on the women's side. I feel like, especially in the portal, when you're the tough thing is what are you going to be willing to spend to maybe go get a player out of the transfer portal, and how does that impact your current team? Because you can have somebody who's done a great job and been in your program for 2 or 3 years, and all of a sudden you're going to end up paying somebody from outside the program more than what they're getting, and they could be a comparable player. I think that's going to be a real difficult issue. But the answer is yes, the more high profile, there's a certain segment of women's basketball recruits that it's not going to be a big deal. They're not. You're still going to be able to recruit without that being a big issue or really any issue. But it's gonna keep playing. It's going to become a bigger deal. But like I said, I think the revenue sharing piece maybe can help a school like Creighton, where we're going to get X amount, and then we can decide how we want to distribute it. But it's a different world. I mean, I was listening, before we left to go to our game at Providence the other day, I had the Florida Kentucky men's game on, and I caught Dan Schulman talking about Florida, and he says something to the effect of, some of these Florida players have been here for 2 and even 3 years. And I thought to myself, I'm like, isn't that the way it's supposed to be? But, he said it like it was, but it's true though, especially on the men's side. It's like the fact that you even have to say that is if we walked ourselves back 5 or 10 years, we'd find that to be comical, but probably nobody except me batted an eye when I heard it. I'm like, wait,
well,
that
now
should
they're
be the
talking
norm.
But the opposite end, though, now they've extended it to 5 years, and they're talking about somebody's someday is going to take the NCAA to court and say, "Hey, I'm going to graduate school for a couple of years. I want to play 7 years."
Right. Yeah, I don't know what the answer to that is, because I think it's already hard enough for freshmen to see a path to play, right? I mean, you have younger players in your program, and they're like, okay, maybe I can sit for 1 year, but you're telling me my second year you're going to bring in, 2 seniors at my position, and then my third year and now I haven't even had a chance to prove it. It's a tough thing. Like, I don't know. I wish we'd had put guardrails on it from the beginning. I think compensation is fine. It's great, but there has to be some mechanism to hold students at a university. Maybe we have to make, whether you have to commit 2 years or we can't pay you till your second year or whatever. But I don't know. I just think here's my biggest issue with it. And I think that people don't talk about it enough, is like, okay, somebody can go get money, but what is their 4 or 5 year experience look like if they didn't invest in relationships and develop relationships out of it? If I just went from school A to school B to school C and I never made relationships, what am I going to look back on as far as my college years? And one, and secondly, for the 98% of them that don't go to the NBA or the NFL or MLB or WNBA, what is that first employer going to think when they look at a resume and they see, oh, this kid went to 4 schools in 5 years, and this kid went to 1 school in 5 years or 4 years and got his or her degree? Who's getting that job offer?
Well, I was just going to say that, because in the real, I was talking about student athletes. Well, if we're truly talking about student athletes, and they're going out in the real world, and they have commercials showing them going out in the real world, right?
Yeah.
I can tell you, from a guy who ran a business, you'd see somebody's resume come in and they had 8 jobs in 3 years. It's just like,
yeah,
that's a red flag all over. Like,
right. And I just regret that narrative isn't out there as much as, oh, just go make as much money. There's a balance, right? There's why can't you do both? Why can't you be okay with making X amount, but you know what? I want to have a great 4-year experience. I want to have Ryan Kalkbrenner's experience, or I want to have Morgan Molly's experience. And maybe I didn't make as much as, player A at whatever university, but by God, I had a great experience. And you know what? I was still pretty set up for the rest of my life in terms of what my path was going to be.
Yeah. So Wednesday we got Marquette coming in. What can you tell us about Marquette? 6 p.m. tip at Sokol.
Well, they were picked 10th in our league, and I think they've been the biggest positive surprise. They lost 5 starters and their coach. Megan Duffy went to Virginia Tech, and they graduated a bunch of players. They had a couple kids leave after she left. But they've done a good job. They're real solid. They have a good mix of inside outside. They've got good length. They'll start 6'3" or 4, 6'2", 6'1", and so They don't play real fast, but like a lot of teams in our league. But they've gotten off to a good start. They're 10-4 and 2-1 in the league. And like I said, I think they're the biggest surprise to the positive of anybody in our league.
And again, that's 6 p.m. on Wednesday at Soak Arena. So check it out. One last thing I got to ask you about, and it's only 2 weeks away now. The big game with UConn. It's going to be at CHI. It's going to be Pink Out Day. The men play at 12:30. The women play at 4:30. I got to ask you about this though, because last year when Gino was here in his press conference, he's like, "Yeah," he goes, and that was a night where again we couldn't throw it in the ocean, and just everything went right for them and everything wrong for us. And he said, there was some talk about playing at the big place across the street, but that's not ever going to happen. Why would Flan leave a home court advantage like this? This is awesome, not. So I'm wondering, what was his reaction when you said, "Hey, Gino, we're playing over at the big place"?
I think it was. Well, when Marcus Blossom brought it up, I'm like, I'm all for it. As poorly as we've played against them the last 2 years at Sokol, I'm like, we can't play. I've said this before, and we have played worse, but like we've played really poorly the last 2 years in Sokol, and I think part of it is our kids get too wired, and we've gotten off to bad starts, and so my thought process was, let's try something else, because I'm ready to get rid of the skeletons from our last two at Sokol. But I don't know. I think Gino, I think he'll be fine. He's used to playing in front of a big crowd, and Paige Beckers is from Minnesota, so I'm assuming there'll be a bunch of people drive down.
She had a big contingent there last year.
Yeah, so she'll have a bunch of people, and yeah, had we played better there the last couple of years, I would have maybe been a little bit less inclined to want to do a double or to play at CHI. But I was like, what do we have to lose? We can't play any worse than we have the last 2 years.
Well, I couldn't tell if he was like, using reverse psychology on that.
Yeah.
If I say this, then he won't have a game there. That's fine with me. I didn't know where he was going with that.
Yeah.
But I thought it was just so hilarious. He just said that last time he was here, and now next year we're playing at CHI.
Yeah.
Hey, Flan, thanks so much for joining us. Really appreciate it. Best luck Wednesday and the rest of the season, and we'll be chatting with you down the road.
Okay. Always good to talk, Tim. Happy New Year.
Right, thanks, man.